all for being here. If you came in and you're an agent, go ahead and rename yourself and put the area that you serve right after your name. A lot of you have already done it, but if you haven't yet, please do. It helps you guys connect even outside of these calls. This will be recorded. Just by the fact that you're here and or registered, you'll be getting the recording. There will also be opportunities after this call that you can set up a one-on-one meeting with Don. Again, I mentioned briefly as I was talking to Darnell that Don has been involved in selling land, ranches, ag in multiple states. He's based out of Nebraska. He is a cattleman himself, so very experienced, and he is more than happy. He's on a mission to protect residential agents from stepping in a cow pie by doing something with land when they don't know what they're doing. And that's really part of what we're going to talk about. Also, just going into the huge opportunities because land, as well as commercial and ranches, as you guys know on here, there's so much opportunity there. And he's really going to be able to address today for you those preliminary big picture questions on, is this something that would be worthwhile for you in your practice to incorporate more knowledge and more experience and add this into what you're doing for your business. So Don Kracke, incredible agent. He is also a coach for both real estate and business. I'm going to turn things over to you and please get us started and tell us, what do we need to know if we want to sell land?
Well, thank you, Bridget. Welcome, everybody. My first question right off the bat is, what do you need to know right now to sell or buy land? Think about that for a second. Right now, if you have the opportunity, what is it that you need? And we're going to try and touch on that throughout this next 30, 35 minutes. And we're going to try to give you a working knowledge of some things. Obviously, it can be very, very complex, as you'll see as we go through. So I don't expect anybody to know everything by any stretch, but I'm here to help. My job, as we always say, my job is to make you look good because I don't look good. I know that. I'm just me. I'm Don. I've never changed. I'm the same. So if you don't like what I say, I guess tough. If you like what I say, wonderful. But we're going to have fun today, and we're going to try and bring you some things that are really key to your business. Bridget's got a poll for you first. While we're working on that poll, we want to know kind of where you're at in the land world right now, and so if you could answer that poll, that would be great. But as you're doing that, let me explain a little bit about who I am. I'm in Nebraska. I used to live in Iowa when I got out of college. I worked for a large company there. Then we moved back to Nebraska and I bought 2 sale barns and we managed a third. If you don't know what a sale barn is, it's a livestock auction market where we would run through cattle, pigs, sheep, horses. We even had a couple of buffalo sales. And so we ran 3 auction markets. And so that means I sat in the cattle sale 3 days, maybe 4, maybe 5 days a week. And yes, I'm an auctioneer, but I was not the main auctioneer because it's really hard to manage a sale barn when people come in. But I've managed several different companies. I've started companies, some successfully, some not. It's all part of business. That's the way we learn. So that's why I'm a certified business coach. And this is what I do. So I'm looking forward to moving on through this program. Now let's take a look and see, what do we have? Somewhat confident, but I need more guidance. 47%, not very confident, and 1 in 5, very confident. Wonderful. Mr. Very or Mrs. Very confident. Let's have a good conversation together. And I want to be challenged. I expect you to challenge me if you can. Everybody else, let's learn together. Now we know that people are moving out of town on a regular basis. They want an acreage to live out in the country to get away from their neighbor. I probably shouldn't say this, but the rule of thumb is for most acreage people, and especially farm and ranch people, I'll say this, I probably shouldn't. But if you can step outside and pee off your back porch in the morning without your neighbor seeing you, you're okay. Otherwise, your neighbor is too close. So we're out in that country, and that's where we're going to work right now. So the next thing is what are they looking for? And in regard to the ground, sometimes people are looking for 20 acres. Some are looking for 1 or 2. Some are looking for a larger tract, quarter half section, what have you. But the biggest thing that I find is that when people are looking for an acreage, yes, I want as much land as I can get. Keep in mind that there's maintenance with that land. And so often people maybe they may get 5 acres, say, well, that's enough for me. Okay. 1 acre may be too much because you have to mow, you have to weed control, you have to fence if you choose to. So in all actuality, be cautious when they're looking. I want as much land as I want. 2 years later, they don't like you anymore because it's so much work. I've got way too much to mow, too much to handle. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. But there's a lot of interest in moving out into the country, and that's where you guys can really be efficient. Bridget, you can go to the next slide. Now, one thing to keep in mind is everybody thinks that commissions are very large in land. Well, they can be, but that's because you're talking about a lot of acres in some cases. You may be talking about 10 sections. A section is 640 acres. Most people talking quarter sections or half sections. A half section is 80 acres. Quarter section is 160. So the biggest challenge is a lot of people see, okay, this can be a really big commission. Okay, that's wonderful. But also keep in mind that there are other things that go with it that as you're working through things, you might have a easement, you might have water issues, you might have flood zone, you might have a lot of different things, water rights. But one thing that everybody does, if they're not concerned, they're going to go to Chat GPT and they're going to scramble and look for things, and they just hope that their client doesn't notice. Guess what? They notice. If you're not confident, they can sense that. Just like when you're selling a home, if you're confident, things usually go well. If you're not confident, they wonder, do I have the right agent? So for all practical purposes, keep in mind that if you're not for sure, you can hide it only so long. But there's some really big things that can happen when you sell ground if you don't have all the details or all the data that you need. So we'll move into that and I'll explain what some of those are, but there are some major pitfalls. But we can prevent all of those. We'll talk about those today. So next on my list, as we go through, we talked about a little bit about zoning. And one thing in regard to zoning, it's different in every county. It can be different in another part of the county. It all depends on your local officials, whether it be the planning zoning committee or department or the county. State may have something to do. But for example, one thing, say you've got 20 acres of ground, and in that area, they'll only allow you to put 3 residential properties on that 20 acres, or it may be a quarter section and they'll only allow 1 or 2. You need to learn that. Where do you go? You go to the planning and zoning office to start first. And then in small town America, keep in mind that the local town has jurisdiction, well, usually a mile or 2 outside of the small town. You need to adhere to what their regulations are too. And we'll talk about that in a study case, a land study case that we're going to talk about later. But you really need to know who to ask. And if you're not for certain, ask everybody, the county, the state, and your local. Because sometimes the locals can be the hardest to work with because they don't do it all the time. So it's all new and they get their own pro forma out here and say, on line 56, it says we need to do this. And so they feel important. They'll hold you to that. So that's where kindness comes in to walk through. So when you talk about land values, now here's what you really need to know. When talking about land values, how do we get there? Number one, in the ag world, is it pasture? Is it crop ground? Is it irrigated? Is it CRP, which is the Conservation Reserve Program? All those have different values. Now, when it comes to irrigated ground and dry land, crop ground, keep in mind that the value of that farm is based on soil quality, topography, how rolling is it? Is there a wetland under it? Is there going to be flood zone issues that we don't see very often, but all of a sudden next year it's all underwater? Those are things to really check. Now, another thing that's really important when you find out which piece of ground you're selling or you're working with, you need to know, is there an easement? And what is an easement? It's an access to use the property by somebody else. Usually it's underground or overhead. For example, a gas pipeline. You can't build a house where a gas pipeline is. You can do it, but you're probably going to get in big trouble and a big kaboom. Electric lines, are they there? What is the zoning? Is it agriculture? Is it agricultural residential? Is it commercial? Is it industrial? There's a variety of things that you need to check there. And then the other thing are easements that a lot of people don't know they exist. We talked about easements a little bit, but you really have to dig on that. And oftentimes it's really good to have a title company do that preliminary research for you because you may miss it. And it's hard to find in some of the state sites. It truly is. We talked about flood zones a little bit. There's a 500-year, there's a 100-year flood zone, and 500 years, it may be 20 years until that farm is underwater or wherever you're going to build a house. Very, very important that you follow through on that and you have to disclose that because number one, an insurance company may not insure it. Even though it hasn't flooded for 20 years, it's still in the 500 years flood plan. So if they're going to insure it, if they will, it's going to be quite a bit higher. Sometimes people are really frustrated about, well, it's never flooded here. Well, that one time, that's what the insurance companies bank in their logarithms on. And then the last thing on this slide would be you really need to know what the people want, whether it's a farmer or a rancher or a person in town that wants a residential property. What is it that they truly want? Do they just want to be away from people? Do they want a larger tract that they've got to maintain? What makes them happy? And on the farmer side that's selling it, what makes him happy? Because they're not going to sell it to just anybody oftentimes. There's got to be a reason that they need to sell, want to sell, and or maybe they're being forced to sell. Those are all things that are good to know. And in being forced to sell, also, just so that you're aware, I have a division where I work with people that are financially distressed, and we bring in investors to see if we can help put a Band-Aid on to get them into a better loan situation. But that's a whole different story for another day. Now, in regard to knowing what you need to know for farm ground and pasture near a larger city, you need to know what the planning and zoning's long-term plans are. Those are really important. What is the long-term plan for that particular area? Good example, Lincoln, Nebraska, there used to be a guy there I'd always talk to that he was in charge of approving or unapproving. And his answer was usually no, Don, that's not in a long-term plan. Well, why can't it be? It's not in our long-term plan, period. Okay. He didn't give me a reason he wasn't going to. It just wasn't in their plan. So that's always something to look at is the long-term plan. Now, as we move forward, when we talk about the water, one thing is really important for acreages or for farm ground. If it's going to be irrigated, it needs to have wells that are pumping 500 to 1,000 gallon a minute. For an acreage, usually you can get by with 5 to 10, 12 gallon a minute. It's fine. That you can water your lawn. You can run sprinklers, whatever. You're fine. You can have a few head of livestock. You'll have plenty of water. Keep in mind that there are certain areas and they may be only miles apart. Not very far apart. One property may be just fine. The next property may have 1 gallon a minute. The next property may have a salt problem, a salty water problem. So you really can't use that. You can filter it, but it's probably not a good choice. So I've seen it many times where it was only just a mile down the road. They did not have water. There's a small town in outside of Lincoln that is growing and they want to grow more, but they don't have the water. And they've got to go to the north and west to get water. They can't go to the south and the east or the south because it's either salty or there is no water. Now, how did we figure that out? You talk to the well people, the well drillers, the plumbers in the area that do that kind of thing and say, hey, what have you seen before you drill a test well? You really need to know what they have to say because it can be free information too, which is kind of cool. I like free. Any questions so far?
There's one question that came up just about easements. Don't agents need to be aware that sometimes there are gentlemen's agreements or verbal agreements and easements that have been long-standing, especially if it's been in one family for a long time, and heirs are coming along to sell it and they're not even aware. But, so just the easement, I cannot stress enough that easements can bite you in the butt.
Yes, they can. A prime example would that be you say there's access to a lake, a small lake, and the same person has driven down that dirt path for years and years and years. And then the property changed hands and the new buyer will not let that person pass. Now, there are some things in the laws that say that it's been used for over 10 years and it can continue to be used. And fence lines are the same thing. When you find fence lines, not always are they accurate, but they've been there for years and years and years, and that's what people have used as the marking point. And through a court case, you can leave that fence there. Oftentimes, I've seen it where surveys were done, and it might have been 30, 40 foot off. And that becomes a challenge, so that becomes a legal battle. I shouldn't say a legal battle, a legal
Well, it
conversation.
can, right. There's
Yes.
there's another question in the chat too. Does adverse possession restart when property changes hands, or does it carry over?
That's a legal term. It can be both. Can be both, and that's why I really don't want to dive into that because I could be wrong and mislead
Mm,
you there.
Well, not only that, part of that would vary per state as well, but it's definitely something to be on alert for, especially if you're dealing with heirs that haven't set foot on a property in decades. Just really, really drill down on that.
And a preliminary title search with your listing is always good. The second thing is a lien search to make sure nothing's been tied to that. And we've had situations where people wanted to sell land, they had some financial issues, but when they went to sell it and the title company did their work to do the numbers, they owed the bank more than what they were selling it for. So it couldn't be sold. And those doesn't happen very often, but it definitely can. And I've seen it happen before. So whenever you're buying or selling, you really want to do all this due diligence. And if you don't know, ask because it's really important. There are some major pitfalls in land sales that can cause significant issues, legal issues, if you're not careful. But by being careful, it's not a problem. It won't be a problem because you're prepared. On my notes here, I was looking at the flood zone. When we talked about flood zones before, keep in mind that there are wetlands also, and there are riparian streams that can, you'll see it on mapping that those wetlands, the water table is really high. It can be very, very productive ground, but all that water comes up from the ground naturally. You can't tile it away or anything. So because it looks like a perfect piece of ground and great soil types, and the water table comes up, your entire grass field or your crop field floods. You definitely don't want to put a house on there or even a shop building or a garage or anything like that because that water can come up and it can sit there for 2, 3 inches of water above the ground. Where did this come from? It's just a really high water table there. In regard to a project that was done when you look at values of bare ground, whether it be farmland, residential property, commercial property, whatever it may be, but when you have a piece of bare land that you think why I might be able to do something about this, change the use. Whenever I look at ground, I look at the ground for what it is right now, but then I think, what can a bulldozer do? Is it something that would be good or bad for the environment, for the neighbors, for the ground? So always look at property. What is the highest and best use? It might be for commercial development. It might be for acreages. Heck, if you can get it, you can even make it for zoning for commercial if that works. So in this scenario, there was a farm, it was 120 acres, and we talked about the planning commission. The county said, yeah, you can build one house on every 20 acres. Well, the local township said, well, we need 12 acres. So we would allow 12 acres per site. So in this case, that 120-acre parcel became 10 lots of 12 acres. And what did that take to do that? Well, first off, it took an investor that saw the vision that wanted to do this. So he bought the ground and said, okay, we're going to develop this. So they put in the road, a gravel road. They brought in electricity to the property. Everybody had to have their own lagoon or septic. They had to put that in themselves and they had to put in their own wells. So we talked about water earlier. How confident were they that they were going to get a well when they bought this? Because it was not guaranteed that they would have water. So the local well told us, he said, everything in this area is 7 to 12 gallon per minute, and it's about 150 to 160 foot. I would be very confident in telling people that that's a good bet, that they probably will get water. And in this case, everybody did. It wasn't an issue. But there was still a risk there for the buyer. There was no guarantee there was water. There was guarantee there was electricity because it was brought to the corner of the property. And then they had to build their own lanes and things. And there were covenants, the size of the house and what could or couldn't be done. That was all taken care of in the covenants. And then there was a road agreement who everybody would share in the cost of moving snow, re-rocking the driveway or the road and making sure the entrance to the property was taken care of and the weeds mowed. Now, one thing that we did find on that project, though, where we thought the perfect place for a driveway entering those 12 lots was there was a slight hill there. The county roads department says, no, you cannot put a turn in there. That's too dangerous. You need to move it to this point, to another point, about 100 yards away. Well, that was down in the bottom where the vision was good, but it was kind of in the bottom where the water kind of accumulated on big rains. And so there was a negotiation there. Where can we move it? But it ended up being a turn, and there was not an attractive entrance. But that was because the county roads department says, no, we can't do that. And so as a result, we ended up with what it was. Not everybody was all completely happy about it. But when we got into that, before going back to how we set up the electricity and how the individual came out, he went through and looked at the fees he was going to have to pay: rock, gravel, survey, the attorney fee for building the covenants and all of that. All those details. The surveying cost was significant, absolutely significant. So he built that all in. He put his money out front, and everything was set up, and we put in the electricity. The survey was done. It's okay. We needed to sell the lots at X number of dollars. And that's what we did. We sold those lots. They sold those out in less than 8 months. So what was really cool about the project is I got to list the land, I got to sell the land, and then I got to list the lots, and I got to sell the lots. And so it was a situation where I earned a commission twice. I love selling land twice, but that doesn't happen very often. But everything worked out. Everybody's happy. The development is completely full right now, and it's becoming a mature neighborhood. So the long story short, it was a successful mission. The investor was happy. The new owners are happy. And the farmer that sold the ground was happy because he didn't want to mess. He knew that there was extra value in it, but he didn't want to mess with it. So there's your opportunity when you talk to landowners. A lot of guys don't want to go through all those headaches because, as you can see on this slide, there's a lot to it that needs to be done.
So, Don, we have a question in the chat. What do you think of an SID?
Sanitation improvement districts are very good if they're allowed. In my local area around Omaha, SIDs have gone up and they've been very successful. In the Lancaster County area around Lincoln, Nebraska, they do not allow those. Why, I don't know. But they are very effective tools if they're allowed in the area that you're looking at. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
So in finality here, when you look at all these things, now we've touched on just a few. Land is fun. It's exciting. And we've touched on a few things, but one thing I really want to make sure you're aware of, you don't have to go at this alone because people will notice if you don't know what you're doing. And plus the pitfalls are very serious if you make major mistakes just because of incompetence. So I shouldn't say incompetence.
Well,
Not
yeah, right. I agree. And I apologize for interrupting. But that's a place where I've seen a lot of residential experts get themselves in trouble because they think, they have a client that they know and they're like, hey, we've got this one piece of land. It's not a big deal. Could you list it and sell it? And the residential agent, who's brilliant at their job, says, sure. And they do it. And they just run a regular CMA and they list it. It's not just underserving the client. You are opening yourself up to massive liability. And would you mind, Don, if we went back just to that one chart so that you could go over a couple of those key areas? A thought that I had, Don, was for anyone here that really wants to develop their skills in land, one of the things they could do is one time a month, pick a parcel, and then they could run it through these questions and these exercises, and they could analyze it just for practice, and see what would the highest and best use be. How would they value it? If they were listing it, what would they list it for? I think that would be a good way for them to start to develop those skills. But is there anything on here that you wanted to pick out to anyone else?
Well, in this case, it's like a piece of a puzzle. It's building a puzzle. If the first pieces fit, not everything goes in the same order always. So for here, you're talking about best use for agricultural raw ground and based on a per acre comparable. Well, in the scenario for subdivisions, it's per lot performance. It makes a difference because you're dealing with two different types of searches. One is agricultural ground, usually in a bigger tract. It's a different search mechanism, and the lot is a smaller search format for number of acres. Most people can do that. It's on the MLS. Land is not always on the MLS. If you're looking on the MLS for land data, it's far and few between. A lot of times it's not even recorded correctly. So you have to go to the assessor's site and dive in and look. And that's not just, they don't always have sale data. on land. Now, there's some land websites that we pay for to get that information. That's helpful. But everything is a puzzle. If the first piece fits, the second one may not. If it does, and then you go to the income approach, is the next piece of the puzzle. If that looks positive, then you go to the next step to putting all the numbers together in detail. Because unfortunately, when you build out a development like this, there are a lot of hidden costs that you can run into that you may have missed. And how do you know you may miss them? It just happens. There's so many small details in there that show up. So you really need to be thorough when you build out a plan to give to an investor. If you're going to do it by yourself and do it, make sure that you have all the costs built in with cushion, absolutely with cushion.
I was
Okay, go
thinking it
ahead.
was a
You're
good
fine.
time for that next poll to see what kind of challenges and specific questions people would like more information about. Does that sound good?
Sounds wonderful.
Okay. Who's ready to get your poll finger ready to roll? Here we go. So, this is about opportunities and challenges. So, what part of a land transaction feels the most intimidating to you at the moment? Intimidating's the wrong word, just where you'd like more knowledge and where you're concerned you may have a misstep if you did take on either a land listing or buyer.
I like these polls, Bridget. They're kind of fun. I like pushing buttons, So
Me too.
now I don't get to vote in this one, obviously, but
No, we're missing out,
as
Don.
the votes come in,
Coming in, we're almost there.
and correctly looks like the major format.
Okay, everyone have their answer in?
And we've got a couple of people knowing what questions to ask first. That's really important because it depends on who you're talking to, whether it be a seller or a buyer. You really need to understand what they want, what their needs are, and tailor it towards that. No different than buying a house or selling a house. You want to tailor it to the individuals so that because you can talk forever and you can drive forever looking at ground, taking around to people that have no capability of buying it, don't understand. They just like to use your time. You don't want that. Pricing land correctly, getting good comps, good comparables. Where can you find good comparables? You find those at the assessor's office. And then you need to compare the soil types and the topography and the water, whether it be irrigated or non-irrigated. On pasture, how many cattle will it hold? You're not going to find that in the assessors. That's where you need to talk to somebody in the general area. What's the grazing rate? What's the stocking rate? And then you kind of have to make up your own guess on that because the stocking rate is how many cattle or how many pair can you put on how many acres is really important to value. When it comes to water rights, wells and utilities, super, super, super important. You guys are hitting the right targets there. There's ways to find that. There are websites. It takes me a while on some of the well sites to figure out where they're at and are they still active? Have they been capped? There's a lot to do with water rates. So I'm glad people have selected that because that's really, really important. But once again, as we wind down here, you don't have to do this alone. That's what we're here for. Our job is to make you look good. And so that's what I look forward to doing. My job is to work behind the scenes. Nobody needs to know that I exist, but my job is to make you look good.
Well, a couple things, Don. I want to ask you a few questions that people may have in your mind. And if anyone has questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. This would be a good time to start doing some Q&A around this. So, as I mentioned early on, and some of you may have missed it. So, Don is actually licensed in 5 states and has been selling land nearly 30 years. And he's based in Nebraska, but licensed Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, South Dakota, Nebraska. And the thing to remember, though, and I know this from working with him now almost 10 years, he is connected with other agents with a similar background across the country. So when this huge mega opportunity in ag came up in Florida, Don was brought in as a specialist for the ag component, plus he knew the land people there. So if you have any interest in doing anything with land, please make sure that you've got Don's information and know that he can be a resource for you, whether you're in Boston or you're in Hawaii or you're wherever you might be. A couple things that how many of you in here are residential? Can we do a quick show of hands? How many of you are residential and you'd like to start learning more about land and doing more? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that I mentioned before, and a lot of you know me pretty well, I don't run around being fear mongery. This is one of the areas where residential agents can really step in it, so to speak. So do make sure that if you're going to take on land, that you get the support you need either from your broker or you do the research. Never assume like, oh, sure, it's a quarter acre in a non-HOA neighborhood, yeah, I'll list it. It's you want to make sure that you are taking this seriously because frankly, you could jeopardize your license. I know that for those of us that do residential, the biggest area and the biggest place where people get in trouble is in disclosures across the country, but this would probably, if I had to guess, be second, going out of the area of our expertise. So I'm glad to see one of the questions in the chat is where can we learn more? One of the cool things is this is the first class that we're doing, group class that's specializing in land. Don and I are working on a series that is going to be an introduction to selling land, and we're finishing that up. Plan on launching that after the 4th of July. So make sure you put your email in, express your interest, and if you would like that, you'd be able to do that. We're also going to have more group calls very specifically about land where you can really bring all your questions and ask. You can schedule that one-on-one with Don as well, and there's a link right in the chat. A couple of the questions here from the chat. So what is the best way to ensure that utilities are available before we buy the land? Any particular websites that they should check?
Depending on what state and where they're at, the first thing I would check would be with the electrical companies and the gas company to see where those paths are that they service, and are they planning on servicing further than that, or is if somebody would build something out there and there's nothing there, what is the cost to bring those utilities to the property? Hope that helps.
Yeah. And so, Don, I'm going to, Betty Lou Bick Bick has a supplementary question to that question. What if your client is interested? Could they write a letter of intent or make an offer and as part of their feasibility study make it known that they will be verifying everything with utilities on the land? So if your buyer is anxious and wants to make that letter of intent or offer, could they do that and have that be part of their feasibility or due diligence or whatever they
Yes.
call it in their state?
Yes, you can, depending on what your state real estate rules are. On large tracts of ground, we almost always use an LOI first with the due diligence points in there before we reduce it to writing. And the challenge with an LOI is that it's an LOI. It's not binding on anybody really unless you put some meat in there. So that's one thing you want to be aware of. But an LOI is a great way to do things to get your due diligence done before you really dive into the super details of it.
And I would throw into that, if it's okay, if you happen to be in a smaller state, coastal state, if you're selling in a metropolitan area that's experiencing sprawl, that outer ring that's right around your metropolitan area becomes really hot. It becomes very hot property. So you really want to follow that advice. If you've got a serious client, never assume, Don, correct me if I'm wrong, never assume, well, that parcel's been on the market for 7 months. We can take our time and we can look at whatever. Don't do it. You never know the day when someone else is going to go after that. So the letter of intent can be your friend, and or making an offer that protects the interest of your buyer client to show that how serious they are. So that's one thing I would throw in there. Latrice Don has a question. So she has a client that owns land in North Carolina and she's licensed in DC and Maryland. She wants help with high quality resources for raw land development by a private owner for residential home building. Is that something where you'd be able to give some guidance or make some connections?
Yes. Yeah. I'm an accredited land consultant, and that basically there's only like, I don't know, there's less than 1,000 of us across the United States. And these are all people that from all different companies, independents, national firms, you name it. But we've all had to go through the same education course. And there are several, it was like a college semester over, it took a couple of years to get through. And so I have resources from those guys all across the country, and I would not recommend anybody else that wasn't an accredited land consultant through RLI.
One of the things about the ALC is that you also have to have production. So you have to have a track record of actually doing sales in
Yes.
order to, right?
Yes.
Which in residential land, you can get initials after your name without selling a house. So yeah, the accredited land consultant, that's a pretty huge deal. So that's gonna again such a resource. So Latrice, I'll make sure you connect with Don after this. We have a few more questions on there. So do you provide the perk and soil tests and surveys for your seller clients? Nichelle, I have a clarifying question on that. Do you mean like as a listing agent, are you paying for those? I will say I also do not pay for those. We have the clients pay for that. Yeah. I'll say this, and at this point I've coached people, I think over the course of the years I've coached people in I think 41 states. So I've gotten familiar with a lot of the states. I mean, if that's something that maybe you wanted because you need a particular edge in your particular market, maybe. I have sold in Southern California too long. I actually feel like it would be bringing on liability and exposure for you as an agent. So my gut would be like, no. That would be, how does Simon Cowell say it? That'd be a no from me. But I don't want to rule out and say that there's not any instance ever. And we're also happy to discuss that with you after. Bill was asking, just because water or electrical lines are there, it doesn't mean that you're going to use them. And it doesn't mean that it's actually for that land. Any thoughts on that, Don?
He is absolutely correct. Just because they're there doesn't mean they're yours, or doesn't mean you have to use them either.
Yeah. It does.
These are all good questions, Bridget.
Yeah, so you guys are great. Bring me more. I love good questions. Camilla, you have in here seller or buyer. I'm not sure if that was in reference to the perk soil and survey question. Gotcha. Okay, got it. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up as an opportunity, Don, and I'm curious, I'd love your feedback on it for the group. We really, who here has been an agent since 2019 or till now, all of us, right? There, for the first time in decades of big data, there was a shift from leaving small town, leaving rural and suburban, and going towards metropolitan areas and true suburban and urban areas. The pandemic created the shift for the first time in decades where it was people leaving the cities and going out to the country, or at least going to that outer edge where it may still be considered suburban, but it's really outside of a major metropolitan area. And then what is happening is what's happening with some of those city dwellers that said, hey, let's go buy a little farm. We're going to have chickens and we're going to have a beehive and we're going to raise our own food. What's happened in the last couple of years? They're tired of it. The novelty wore off. They romanticized it, and now they're facing the reality. I think there's a huge opportunity for people if you get into communication and you get ahead of some of those people that are going to be selling that property sooner than we would expect. Don, is there an opportunity there?
Absolutely. Yeah, and when we sell acreages in the wintertime, it's harder to sell them because there's snow on the ground. They realize they need a tractor to move the snow, and they need more than just a scoop shovel. They need a snow blower now. And then they find also in the summertime with a lot of rain, they have weeds, and their lawnmower may not be big enough to keep up and they want to go on vacation, but the grass is too cold when they get back. There's a lot of things on an acreage that people love, but then it becomes work, and I can understand that. I can absolutely understand where some people want to move back because it was fun for a while, but we're not country folk.
Right. Yeah. So just keep in mind, and I mentioned that because oftentimes with agent behavior, and please raise your hand if you've ever done this, but you feel like, oh, Jeff just bought a house a year and a half ago. He's not going to need anything. So we don't reach out to Jeff. Anyone else ever do that? You don't reach out to the recent sales or the last 3 years of sales. All I'm telling you is that disruption that occurred in March 2020, we are still feeling ripple effects from it. And one of them is people that bought, even with the interest rate, even if they feel like they have a golden handcuff, they still want options and they're making decisions faster than before. So make sure you're reaching out to people that may be in that situation. Sorry, last little thought on that. If you're sitting there going, I don't have anyone because I'm in a city, you do, because I want you to think back. This would be worth it to me. Take time, set aside 45 minutes, put Steely Dan on, have a cup of coffee, and open up your CRM. Go through your listings sold between 2020 and 2023 and look at each past client. And you just remember, were any of those past clients leaving the country? I'm looking at the screen. I know a few of you had those. Moving to a little farmette, moving to, a whole other state, so This is a time where you're going to want to reach out to those seller clients that left your area that may be falling into this new dynamic of wanting to go back to life prior to the pandemic. Any thoughts on that? Any questions?
Very true.
So any other questions just around starting in land?
Well, before you do that, one thing I want to mention is my most recent clients since I came into Keller Williams that I've kept in constant touch with, and they're very good friends, are the ones I continue doing business with. Now, when I was with the blue guys, they never taught us to do that. So I have lost so many deals over the years. So once the house is sold, they're your buddy. Like I'm on an island. I'm their only friend. I better behave like one and be there when they show up and know when they're showing up and make sure I take them to lunch or dinner. And they refer me their friends and they keep coming. So don't think that just because you sold them something, they're done. That's when life begins and you're their new buddy.
Yeah. Agreed.
And
I
land,
definitely do that.
even more so because they need your help. I just got a call from my client who's a famous singer yesterday saying, I need the HOA information. Like he can't find it himself. I'm so grateful to do it. And I interceded. I said, give me what you need and I'll make sure I get it to them and I'll get you the answer so I can ask the right questions. And he's so grateful.
So we have another question, Don. What county or township offices besides zoning do we need to be familiar with?
Assessor site is one. Treasurer and assessor, so you know what the taxes are, what the legal description is. The planning and zoning is important for what can be done and what if you want to change the use or something. And we didn't even get into special variances or CUPs or anything like that. There's so much more to this, but those would be the main things in the county office. That's where you would start. And if anybody would like to have further discussion, my calendar, my calendar link, I believe Kat put that up. Feel free to schedule a time, and I'd love to visit with you in more detail on what some of these things are, because
We've got another one I think you can tackle is
Yeah.
how do you determine if a lot can be subdivided?
The lot can be subdivided based on planning and zoning regulations. Period. End of story. If it's in the regulations, you can do it. If it's not, you have to get a variance, and that's very difficult to do in most cases.
One other office that I think, depending on where you sell. So when I was selling in Maryland, I was down in a critical water area in Southern California. Another office would be if there's any type of conservation control or coastal control, if you're dealing with a type of property that where that would be an issue. And in some areas, that's part of planning and zoning. And in other areas, it is its own entity, which just makes it more fun at the party.
And in the Midwest, there's
Um,
Farm Service Agency that is the government office that allows you what you can and cannot plant on the ground, on the land and things of that nature from the farm
right,
program.
right.
Very important office.
Well, I feel like you've covered a lot, Don. Is there let's do, Karen, do you have another question?
Well, it's not a question, it's a statement. I sell in an area that we have so many huge lots of lands. We have coastal lands. We have so many rules and regulations. Even if it's a home, you better know what they can do with that house. If they decide to tear down the house and they're in a coastal zone, there's a very good chance they cannot rebuild it. So you have to know that, because if they buy that planning to raise the house and redo it, they won't be able to. They're going to have to follow the exact footprint that's there. And you can only change so much every year. So you have to be very knowledgeable about all this stuff. Do your homework is all I can say. Don gave a lot of information. You have to dig deep, even if it's not just raw land. You have to know to service your clients.
Right. All right. Any other questions?
Feel free to reach out to me if you want to dive in a little bit deeper on a few things. If you got some questions, I'm
And
available.
I saw a few of you put your contact info. Nichelle, thank you for doing that in the chat. It would be great for you guys to reach out and connect with each other. So you can put your information in there and let's stay in touch. So again, Don and we're going to have a whole land series of four classes. You're going to be able to attend live and or just download and watch them. And we plan on having regular land meetings similar to this one, where we go into different aspects of selling land as long as there's an interest for that. A quick show of hands or put in the chat who would be interested in more land specific types of meetings like this. Got a few hearts. Yeah. Sarah.
Just saying I would be interested.
Good. Okay. I thought so, but I wasn't sure. Just want to make sure. All right, so we'll be doing that. Don, can you hang on for a few minutes in case people want to stay and have any other questions?
Certainly. Yes.
Heidi, thank you for putting your info in there. So we can wrap up if you need to jump off. If you have any further questions, you can stay here and you can ask them. But I really appreciate all of you coming today, and I hope you got something to take away. Actually, let's do that real quick. I always like to end classes. Let's have 3 people share something they'll take away from our time together today.
Well, I kind of said it already. Do your homework.
Do your
Don't.
homework. Very good. Anyone else have something they're taking away from today? Betty Lou Bick Bick does. She's going to reach out to her sellers from 2020 through 2023 to see if they want to move back to LA. Rhonda the Victor. Rhonda. Don't assume anything. Due diligence is critical. Yes. Let's get one more and then we'll wrap up. Easements will bite you in the butt. That's me giving my own takeaway from something that I already live by.
Facts also.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. And yeah, we'll stay for a few minutes in case anyone has a follow-up question. Other than that, thank you for attending.
Have a great day.
Thank you very much. I learned a lot today. Thank you.
Good.
Good.
Good,
Thanks
good.
for attending.
Thank you for coming.